Hello and welcome to the Bringing the Farm to School Agriculture Producers Training, the Western Region Facilitators Workshop. My name is Tomas Delgado, Program Manager with the National Farm to School Network, and I'm coming to you from Central Illinois today. We're so excited to spend the next 4 days with you exploring the ins and outs of farm to school. We have a lot of great material with you all, including engaging activities to jump into and several guest speakers with us this week. I'll be hosting the workshop this week along with project partner Tammy Howard of the National Center for Appropriate Technology. Tammy, go ahead and take it away.
Hey there. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this week. We're here to strengthen the farm to school movement and increase opportunities for producers by boosting producers' capacity to sell to school markets through this train the trainer approach. This project capitalizes on the knowledge and strong partnerships of the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and the National Farm to School Network. So my name's Tammy Howard, as Tomas said, and I work with the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and I'm joining you today from Montana. I'm the technical lead for this project, and I'm super excited to share the curriculum that NCAT, the National Farm to School Network, and the FNS, Office of Community Food Systems, worked on together to help you conduct farm to school producer trainings in your state. You will get to know several other NCAT staff over the next few days. From NCAT, you'll get to meet specialist Robert Maggiani from Texas, Margot Hale from Arkansas, and Andy Pressman from New Hampshire. They'll all be joining us and sharing the curriculum on Wednesday. We're also happy to have Carlos Vences, our tech support and Zoom master this week, and he's also based in Arkansas. A lot of these folks have helped with this project from the beginning, and we're so thankful and proud of their contributions. A little bit more about NCAT. The National Center for Appropriate Technology is a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to help people build resilient communities through local and sustainable solutions that reduce poverty, strengthen self-reliance, and protect natural resources. Much of NCAT's work focuses on building sustainable farming and food systems throughout the United States. NCAT is based in Montana, but we also have regional offices throughout the country. We'd like to start by recognizing the project partners on this call. In addition to our staff from the National Center for Appropriate Technology, you will see folks from the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, Office of Community Food Systems, that's a mouthful, and 3 staff members from the National Farm to School Network, zooming in from across the country. And with that, I'll pass this along to Tomas to talk a bit more about the National Farm to School Network and their role in this project. Tomas?
Thank you, Tammy. And for those who just joined, my name is Tomas Delgado, Program Manager with the National Farm to School Network. And I'd like to take this moment to just recognize the team from NFSN that we have with us today. There's been a lot of hard work and a lot of time spent building this project. So I just want to uplift those folks that are with us today who really played a strong role in designing the project that you'll be workshopping in a moment. So with us today is our program associate, Jenny Lee Harris, and senior program manager, Lacey Stephens. And wanted to just thank them all for the work that they've done so far. And yeah, you'll get an opportunity to learn more about them and the work that they do from NFSN as we move along. NFSN, National Farm to School Network, is an information, advocacy, and networking hub for communities working to bring local food sourcing, school gardens, and food and agricultural education into school settings, as well as early care and education settings. You'll have the opportunity to get to know many of us as we move along in these next 4 days. But on that note, I'd like to just pass it over to Jessica Barreto, who's with the Western USDA Food and Nutrition Service Office of Community Systems.
Thank you, Tomas and Tammy, and welcome to everybody. Yeah, as Tomas had said, for those of you who don't know me, I am Jessica Barreto. I work in an interesting role where I'm housed in the Western Regional Office in San Francisco in Food and Nutrition Services. and I am the acting Farm to School regional lead currently. And I work very closely also with the office with OCSF, and I'll have a slide right here to highlight what they are all about. So the USDA FNS, Office of Community Food Systems, commonly referred to as OCFS, helps child nutrition program operators incorporate local foods in the National School Lunch Program and its associated programs, as well as the Summer Food Service Program and Child and Adult Care Food Program. OCSF accomplishes this through grant making, training, technical assistance, and research. And there's a website there, just if you're interested in hearing any more info, reading any more info, and tons of resources there. Next slide, please. So the high level aim of this project is to strengthen the farm to school movement and increase opportunities for producers by boosting producers' capacity to sell to school markets through a train the trainer approach. And as Tomas and Tammy had talked about their respective organizations and the collaborative nature of all this, this project capitalizes on the knowledge and strong partnerships of USDA, Food and Nutrition Service, National Center for Appropriate Technology, and the National Farm to School Network. Next slide, please. So from the FNS perspective, why this project is important, I put on this slide on not only the piece of the FNS mission that relates directly to this training, but also some farm to school goals. So within the FNS mission, which is working with our public, private, and nonprofit partners, our mission is to increase food security and reduce hunger by providing children and low-income people access to food, a healthful diet, and nutrition education in a way, and I bolded this, in a way that supports American agriculture and inspires public confidence. And then down to a more detailed level in terms of farm to school, some goals that I think are worth mentioning are the USDA's farm to school efforts help support American farmers and strengthen the economy. Farm to school initiatives can provide long-term revenues for producers, which boosts local and regional economies and helps create and sustain jobs. And lastly, farm to school efforts can help America strengthen the food supply chain and build back better. And as we all have lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically farm to school supports local food systems and can strengthen supply chains, which are strained by the pandemic. So another aspect of the importance of this work. Next slide, please. I wanted to share some recent data from the Farm to School Census, the 2019 Farm to School Census. This is also on the website, so I really encourage you to go and explore more. But in terms of the WRO, the Western Regional Office, the regional context in food, local food spending, it just gave you some kind of raw numbers here. 3 columns. First column is all the states or territories that are in WRO. Second column is school year 2018-2019 approximate local food costs compared to final column school year 2018-2019 approximate total food costs. So here you get a snapshot of how each state or territory is allocating those funds in terms of what is spent on local and then just the total food costs, which I think is interesting. The next slide, please, will show you similar data. But this is in percentage. So you can go through and in the middle column, see the average percentage of total food costs from local foods. And then interestingly, just for what it's worth, in the third column, it's just subtracting local milk. So you know, the second column is the total food costs from local foods. And then if local milk was not included, that's what the percentage would be. And that's in the final column. Thank you. Next slide. All right, and lastly, if you're curious, I was curious and thought this was interesting. Same thing, first column shows you the WRO states and territories, and then the second, third, and fourth columns are showing you the top local foods by spending, you know, top, second, and third. So giving folks a second to look at that. And then lastly, oh no, yeah, that's fine. I know we have a packed agenda, so I will close out by thanking you all again for your participation. We really do value your time and being part of this training program and appreciate you bringing your expertise to support producers in strengthening their capacity to sell in schools. I will be attending almost all of this training because I'm so excited to learn with you as my schedule allows. But I do want to highlight that if you do see, it wouldn't be many, but a few other of my colleagues from the Western Regional Office, FNS, pop into certain sessions. That is because they share my enthusiasm and are really interested in supporting this movement. And you know, they're just kind of attending when their schedules allow. So if you see any of us in any of your various sessions, we're just there to learn and be a support. So thanks again, and I will pass it off to whomever is next.
Thanks, Jessica, for all of that information, and thank you for being in attendance with us today. We really appreciate that. Yeah, so we want to just also acknowledge the Project Advisory Council that met monthly during the curriculum development phase of the project, offering thought partnership, immediate feedback on curriculum, and have really continued to offer their expertise throughout the workshop planning phases. In the grounding of the program and best practices, as well as working with and training producers in the future. So we'd just like to extend a thanks to all the folks who are on that council and just thank them for their dedication and contributions to the project thus far. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some of those folks from our advisory council are actually joining us for this particular workshop and doing some of the facilitation. So an extra big thanks to them. So now let's learn more about who's joining us as attendees. Based on the information that you all shared during your registration, you can see the Food and Nutrition Service Western Region states, and we have attendees from across the Western region. You can see here the breakdown of attendees by state. We have 1 from Alaska, 11 from California, 6 from Hawaii, 2 from Idaho, 1 from Nevada, 7 from Oregon, 8 from Washington. We also have 10 folks joining us from Texas that were not able to make the Southwest training last month, and 4 tribal affiliates, 1 from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Oregon, 2 from the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council in Montana, and 1 participant from Santa Clara Pueblo in New Mexico. And here's a breakdown of the participants by the type of organization. Next slide. 3 of our participants are from university extension programs. 21 are from state agencies. 19 of our participants today are from nonprofits, including producer support organizations. And then we have 8 that selected other. So that includes Red Corn Farms. So we've got some farmers joining us, African-American farmers of California, and education regions from across Texas. So we're all excited to have you here. And we want to, again, thank you for your support and your participation and time this week. Tomas?
Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for being here today and participating in this training program. Our goals for the week include just an overall goal of bringing together representatives from state agencies, extension offices, and producer support organizations that are interested in training producers in selling to schools in their respective states. So ultimately forming state training teams is one of the biggest goals of this workshop this week. In addition to that, exploring the bringing the farm to school training materials and providing an overview of the module content is a goal. The next goal is developing an action plan for each state training team to use as a blueprint for planning a local producer training in your own state. And then learning from producers seasoned in school sales, as well as providing opportunities for state teams to work together in small breakout groups with support from NCAT and NFSN as you begin to plan your own local producer trainings.
So most of you have received an agenda in the packet that was FedEx to you last week. The agenda is designed to reflect the workshop goals and to keep you engaged with plenty of opportunities to interact with the project content, each other, and your state team members. And today we are going to be spending some time just introducing that training program and the trainer's toolkit content. And in the second half of today's workshop, we have a panel featuring Kyle Flack from Bell's Farm and Shelly Muzzle from Three Sisters Beef and Family Farm. So that's going to be an exciting way to close the day. And then on days 2 and 3, we'll be focusing on the producer training curriculum content. And hopefully we want you to gain a better understanding of the content you'll be delivering to producers. And there'll be ongoing opportunities for you to work with your state partners in that kind of team formation. And then finally on day 4, we'll be taking a virtual site visit of the Hawaii Institute of Pacific Agriculture and have the opportunity to chat with Erica and Dash Kerr. They're founders of HIP Agriculture. So that's exciting. And then we'll spend some time with the planning and outreach guide tool and then go through the training evaluation process.
Yeah, so we acknowledge that COVID-19 pandemic in particular has brought a new level of complexity to farm to school, to providing trainings and to working with producers. So we've spent the last 6 months adapting content and training approaches to meet the needs of the current situation. And we understand that this is not the ideal format to be conducting this type of a training, but we also seen incredible resilience and innovation during this time and know that the work must continue. So thank you all for sort of going with us in this journey as we go through these workshops virtually. We've built in a lot of opportunities to interact throughout the workshop, as well as daily 15-minute breaks and additional 5-minute breaks between transitions. So even so, we know that virtual trainings can be challenging, so please feel free to step away and take care of yourself as needed. And lastly, one major adaptation of course, is the virtual platform that we're using right now. And I'd like to turn it over to Carlos Vinces to help us get to know our virtual training technology.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carlos Vinces, and I'm the SARC project assistant at ANCAT, and I'll be the tech support for this workshop. So we're probably familiar with Zoom, so this will be just a quick overview for everyone. First of all, to rename yourself, please click the arrow in your individual Zoom box and select rename. We'd like you to please add your name, state, organization. And we strongly encourage you to access this meeting via video versus just calling in, and to have your video on so we can see each other and increase interaction. This is especially helpful in breakout conversations. And if you must, you can call in for the meeting. To note, if you're on video but also using your phone for audio, we ask that you make sure you enter your participant ID when joining on your phone. This helps sync your video with your phone number so you don't look like 2 separate participants in the meeting. And this is important for breakout groups. You can find the participant ID number by clicking on the meeting info icon in the top left of your Zoom screen. We ask that you please mute yourself when we're not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. We're also using a few different functions within Zoom during this meeting, so I want you to be familiar with them. We do have closed captioning as an option. So on the bottom of your panel, you should see a live transcript, and you can either show subtitles or hide the subtitles as desired. If you choose view full transcript, you'll be able to see the full transcript in the real time in the right of your screen, like the chat box. So if you have any trouble with this, just let us know in the chat. You can change your screen view in the top right of your screen to see side by side with the shared screen on either gallery view or speaker view. So if you want to see more people, you can hover over the space between the slides and faces, and a line will pop up so you can slide to see more folk. Or you can use the arrows at the top and bottom of the gallery to move through the attendees. For the chat function, If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat with your name and organization. Feel free to use chat for any questions you have that you don't want to hold for designated Q&A times. So if you don't want to verbalize a comment or question later, we will be responding to any questions we can that have short answers within the chat. And questions are directed towards specific speakers or topics will be held until Q&A times, unless the speaker indicates that interruptions are okay. We also have the raising hand function. So on your bottom panel, click reactions, and you should see the raised hand option. So raise your hand to be called on your Q&A for Q&A times. Sorry. Please do not use this function during a presentation and use this chat instead. We'd also like to notify you that your participation is considered consent to record the main room sessions. And if this is a concern, please connect with me or Lacey in the chat. There are several points in this, the next 4 days that you'll be sent to various breakout rooms. You'll be pre-assigned by state. All you have to do is click on join room when it pops up on your screen, and that should take you to your breakout room. You're always able to leave a breakout room and return to the main room, but unless you have an issue that needs addressing, we encourage that you stay in the breakout room until you see the pop-up asking you to return, or until your breakout room is done with their activity. The host can send chats to other rooms at once, but otherwise the chats become individual group chats, so you can use them within your group. For polling, we'll be doing several live polls during the meeting, so you should see a pop-up on your window where you can take the poll. Please engage in all the polls, and we won't close them until we have 100% participation. Please reach out to me via the chat function, or you can text me on my phone. That's up there on the slide, 512-214-0750. If you have any tech issues during the meeting or any questions, this information is also in the participant and presenter home-based documents if you need it. So I am looking forward to a great couple of days together. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Hey, everybody. This is Lacey Stevens with the National Farm to School Network, and I'm just going to build on what Carlos shared and share a couple more resources and tools that we'll be using over the next 4 days to hopefully help you kind of navigate this virtual space and hopefully make it feel a little more interactive and connected to all the folks here, as well as the folks in your team as well and from your state. So the first tool I'm going to share is the participant home base. And you should have gotten links to this. We're also going to drop it in the chat box for you, but we know we're going to be throwing a lot of information and resources at you, and different places to potentially navigate virtually. But if you can have this one participant home base up and available, this will make sure you can get to wherever you need to go. So it'll have all of the resources that you might need to click on. It will have contact information for all of us as coordinators or anybody you might want to reach out to. It'll have the most up-to-date agenda. So if we have to do a little tweaking to agenda, we'll make sure that this agenda is always up to date. So this is a great item to have just on your in a window open on your desktop to continue to return back to. It will also have the link to each of your state Jamboards, which I will cover next. So I'm going to switch my screen and show you one of these Jamboards that we'll be using to work together over the next 4 days. So the sample I'm going to share is Oregon. So thanks, Oregon, for your participation and being our guinea pig here to share. So for folks who haven't used Jamboard before, this is a kind of interactive tool for you all to do some shared brainstorming, work together in your states, and each state will have their own Jamboard. Many of you have already been in there and received it, but as we break out into groups, your facilitator will also make sure that you have that link and are able to access the Jamboard. You can also access the Jamboard again via your participant home base. So just a little kind of 101 on Jamboard to help you navigate it. So as you move through, you can use these arrows at the top to move through the Jamboard. So this you see is Jamboard 1 here, where you're going to have our first breakout group discussion. To move through, you just click back and forth up on these arrows and can move through 1 through 20. To add content to the Jamboard, you're going to use this toolbar over here. probably the one you'll use the most is the sticky note function. So to use that, you just click on that sticky note function, put in your message here. You can change the colors. So if each person in your group wants to be a different color, or you want to categorize by different colors, you can do that as well. Make sure you click save, and that's going to pop up on your Jamboard there, and you can move them. These are great to be able to kind of group ideas together and utilize the Jamboard to organize your thoughts that way. So that is Jamboard, and that'll be a tool that we'll continue to use as we go into our breakout sessions. The other functions that you can use within Jamboard, you can add a text box. So you can pop a message in here, just via text, which you can change the color of up here in this toolbar. You could add pictures. So to add an image, you can click the little mountain button here. And then you can download either from your from the internet or from your computer and add your image that way, which we may want to do for our first breakout when we talk about our Farm to School in Action photos. So I will clear Oregon's board so they can have a fresh Jamboard to start with. But we'll pause for just a few minutes to see if there are any questions about the functions we'll be using, about the home base, how to access any of these tools. Feel free to jump in, or feel free to add your question to the chat box, and we'll just pause a moment. All right, not seeing any right away. We're going to do a little practice poll. Not practice, we do want this information too, but it'll also help you practice the polling. So I think, Carlos, could you launch our poll for us? We've got two questions for you. One is around how many producer trainings have you conducted? And then the second is around what's your timing? If you kind of as a group have talked about or have consideration of when you might be doing trainings, when might that be happening for you? So we're gonna launch our poll here. All right, so there should be two questions. Please feel free to answer both. All right, folks are piping in here. We'll give it another few seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close our poll and share our results with you. But it looks like we have a lot of folks who might be new to doing some producer training. So about 19 of our 29 folks, about 2/3 of folks, this would be their first producer training. So glad to have you all. And then we've got a number of folks who have done one or two, and a few of those experts in the house who've done several or too many to count. And just thinking about your timeline, looks like a lot of folks aren't quite sure yet, which is totally okay. We are glad to see that you're here and thinking about this as an opportunity and possibility. And we've got a few folks who are looking at introducing some trainings in the next 3 to 6 months. So that's great too. And we'll be able to kind of work on everybody's timeline and support everybody regardless of where you are and you're thinking about how this fits into your work. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we'll turn it back over to Tomas. And Tomas, I will change your screen here for you.
Thanks, Lacey. Yeah, so up next, we're just going to talk and touch on the group agreements and expectations for the workshop. And then these will also help you structure sort of these agreements and expectations for your local producer trainings as well. So you can find this segment in the Facilitator's Guide if you have that handy. And yeah, let's jump into it. So although community agreements should ideally be co-constructed, here are just a few examples of agreements that sort of we can just land on for our time with us this week. So up front, just acknowledge the gender, race, class, and heteronormative power dynamics in the room, as well as differences in farm size and experience, and just different levels of expertise and really just different levels of work and skill levels that producers are bringing to the table and all participants are bringing as well. Another agreement is to just one voice at a time. So just, leave the floor to others to speak, and that kind of merges nicely into the next agreement, take space, make space. So if you're someone who talks a lot, just make sure you're making space for those who don't talk too much. So yeah, we encourage folks who are a little on the shyer side to speak up while you're here with us this week. Avoid industry language. If you are going to use maybe terminologies that's specific to your line of work or just this sector, just bring it along with just sort of clarification and definitions for those who may not be familiar with all of the up-to-date industry lingo that we have. Another agreement is no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. I really like that one. And then stay mentally and physically present. So we just ask that you try and just be as engaged in our time together as best you can. And please turn on cameras if you're able to. And then we definitely invite you to come off mute to share any thoughts, ideas, or questions that you may have. So I'm going to take a moment to just open it up to you all in the audience and learn if there's any agreements that you think we should add. So let's take the next couple minutes to utilize our chat box or just come off mute to share any kind of community agreements that you think should be uplifted. Yeah, that's great. There's no such thing as a bad or stupid question. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sorry, there's some construction going on next door. Yeah. Yes, kids and animals always welcome. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right, well, not seeing or hearing anymore, so we can move on. But if there are any others that sort of come to the surface, please just free feel to contribute them into the chat. Okay. Yeah, so you can find these agreements in the participant home base that was linked to you earlier. And, we understand that Zoom fatigue is real. And so we've really tried our best to make some efforts to sort of break up that fatigue over the next 4 days of the workshop. And we're doing so by trying to really make this time as interactive as possible. So for this training, we'll be encouraging engagement from state teams through holding a contest. Whichever team answers the most questions over the course of the next 4 days of the training will win a $25 Etsy gift card for each member of your team. So I'm going to pass it along to Lacey to talk about our breakout sessions, but we'll revisit that that contest a little later in our day, just to give you some more details on that. Take it away, Lacey.
Thanks, Tomas. So we are getting ready to go into our first breakout session. Logistically, what will happen is Carlos is working behind the scenes to get those all set up. And then when we press go, a little pop-up window will open up on your screen and it'll ask if you want to be sent into your breakout room. All you have to do is click yes, send me to my breakout room, and you will be whisked away to your state room. So each state will have a room. A few states that have smaller numbers of people will come together to have more shared conversation. But for most folks, it will be their state colleagues in the room with them. If you end up in the wrong room for some reason, you can just click come back to the main room, leave your breakout room, come back to the main room, and we can make sure you get to the right place. So to share a little bit about kind of the function of these breakout rooms, what we've heard over and over from folks in the previous sessions is that it's really in these kind of breakout rooms, working with their states, that's really when they get kind of the most out of this workshop and training. And so we're going to have breakout rooms about 2 times a day over the next 4 days. The purpose of these rooms are for you to build those connections with folks in your state. Everyone's here because they have an interest in producer training. They have an interest in how this might look in their state and how these producer training tools might be applicable in their state. And so these breakout rooms are an opportunity for you to collaboratively explore how bringing the farm to school could be brought to your state. And we want to acknowledge and know that this is going to look different from state to state. Some states, they are raring to go. They've got a team put together. They're really getting those dates on the calendar and are ready to move. Other states are ready to have a conversation about where could these ideas fit into some trainings that we're already doing, or getting to know one another and knowing what you're already doing in your state. So we know that states are in different places, and these breakout rooms give you an opportunity to work from where you are and work from where you're starting from. You will have a facilitator in your room. So some facilitators are folks that you'll recognize from your state. Some of them are from NFSN and NCAT. So we'll be there to help you kind of work you through these questions and work you through these Jamboard prompts is how these are going to be structured. So again, every team has a Jamboard. You can find those in your participant home base, and your facilitator will also make sure that you have access to those as you go into the room. So the first breakout session that we're going to work through today is really the chance to get to know one another and to think about what brought you into this space for the next 4 days. So your facilitator will help guide you through these questions, but we're going to go through Jamboards 1, 2, and 3. The first is the opportunity for you to share your name, your organization, and if you have the chance to, share your Farm to School in Action photo. Give us a little insight on what Farm to School in Action looks like for you in your state. And then you're going to have, as time allows, the opportunity to share what your hopes are for the next 4 days. And then think about, where does your organization fit into Farm to School training, into producer training specifically, and share that with the folks in your group. Also noting that folks are going to, groups are different sizes, so they're going to move through these questions at different paces, and that's totally okay. There'll be time to kind of catch up on some of those questions maybe you don't get to, or return to some of the conversations in later days. So don't feel pressured to move through these too quickly, but we do want to give you the chance to talk through all of the items as we go forward. So I think with that, we are ready to break out. Again, you'll see that pop-up box. Click let's go, and you'll be whisked away to your group.
All right, great to have everyone back, folks. Hopefully that first breakout session went well today. We're actually gonna move into just a quick break. Just about 5-minute break here. Let's see, what time do we have? Let's connect back at 1:45 p.m. Pacific time. So just 5 minutes from now, let's convene back here, and then we'll move into the next session. All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're moving in along with the rest of the day. We'll be looking at the really just kind of answering the question of why the Bringing the Farm to School training program exists, why it was built, and why we'll all be working on it this week. So thanks so much. Yeah, so the Farm to School movement up until this point has been very strong on educating students and food service personnel on the triple bottom line, which was explained a little earlier today. But because of this relatively high demand of local products on school menus, there's very strong farm to school programs that have great producer tools rather, and there are still relatively few opportunities and resources for producers to be trained in accessing school markets, although. So one of the goals of this project is to really elevate the amazing tools that many of you have created, and create new ones as well as identify gaps in these tools and the network of them, and provide comprehensive curriculum for state agency folks and farm to school leaders to use in helping build a really a really robust and beneficial producer training in the future. Yeah. So this is a train the trainer project, and the folks at NCAT and NFSN have worked with the Office of Community Food Systems to develop a comprehensive curriculum for trainers to use in helping producers access school markets in their states. This week is the fifth of 7 regional workshops we have been hosting throughout the U.S. And we hope each state team in the West leaves with an action plan to use for planning and preparing a local producer training. We are currently in phase 3 of this project. The needs assessment has been completed by Carolyn, Carolyn Dimitri, one of the evaluators at New York University. And in a moment, she'll be sharing the findings of the needs assessment in a moment. And based off of the findings of the needs assessment, our curriculum team developed the curriculum that you all received in the mail. So all of that was put together and designed based off of a lot of feedback and just a lot of reviews from folks during our assessment phases. If you'd like to access the materials online, you can do so by visiting the website, and we'll be able to share that website link in the chat in a moment. And then moving forward with the day, we'll be digging into the curriculum and training tools as well. So since the national pilot, which was conducted in September 2020, we've worked to finalize the case studies, which you can also access at the website. Let me just make sure you're getting those links. I can share those links now. That's the link to the case studies, and then this is the link to just the project's website. So that'll kind of serve as a hub for all of the information, and you'll be able to access the digital version of those curriculum materials there as well. Yeah, so moving on. After completing this workshop, state training teams will hold local producer trainings in their respective states. And our ultimate goal is that that you'll all have the tools, resources, and the know-how for attending and building your own producer capacity, your producer training as well. And you may notice an overlap in some of the timings of the regional facilitator workshops that we're in now and the subsequent workshops that we have in the future with some other producer trainings that may be happening in your own state or in other states. This is because some state training teams may want to conduct their producer trainings shortly after this workshop, sort of while it's sort of fresh in their own minds and while there's still a lot of energy and momentum to tap into. We encourage states to really consider the production season of their own producers within their state when thinking about those training times, as well as when attendees could be available, and then when site visits can be conducted. So all of these we'll go into in depth as we move on in the week on really how to structure and schedule and work towards planning your own workshop. And we'll be touching on those on day 4. The producer curriculum is designed to be flexible, adaptive, customizable, and really meant to just really build your training opportunities within your own state. On the screen here, you'll see some options for you and your team to plan the standalone training. Possibly the producer training can be added on to an existing producer-focused event. You can also even collaborate or incorporate the curriculum content into a similarly focused producer training event within your state as well. So there's a lot of flexibility in presenting these trainings, and we really want to ensure that you all are planning these producer-focused events with how it makes most sense in your own communities and your own states and regions. The format and agenda is also flexible depending on your time and capacities. You can find sample agendas to help plan your training on page 112 of the Facilitator's Guide. The ideal recommended format is 2 full days of trainings with experiential components for farm tools, farm tours, panels, as well as sort of other opportunities for producers or school nutrition staff to kind of share some of their expertise and experiences from that end. Alternatively, you can plan a single day with a truncated content, if that makes most sense for you all. You can also create flexibility by presenting the content in smaller sort of half-day sessions over the course of maybe several weeks. So the variations are pretty endless, and we just encourage you to approach the producer trainings with whatever makes most sense for producers in your area. There's also a potential maybe conducting more targeted training with very specific content for specific producers to really look at sort of how certain producers may approach farm to school versus others. So as I said, there's plenty of opportunities for you to sort of mix it up. There's additional information on funding your training in the Planning and Outreach Guide, which is going to be more heavily covered on day 4. So we just know that it is important to talk about that from the start. So this graphic here is available as a link in your Planning and Outreach Guide if you're accessed it digitally. And I know it's a little too small for the screen, but I just want to give you the visual reference here as well. I think we should be able to maybe share a link possibly in the chat for you. But yeah, this really just covers some of the funding resources that are also listed in pages 8 through 9 of the Planning and Outreach Guide. This may start to give you some ideas for how to find funding for bringing the farm to school producer training project in your own state. And think of this week as an opportunity to form partnerships that can help you and help others train producers, and consider those partnerships as you think of finding funding for the farm to school producer training events. So as your state training teams start to plan local producer trainings, it is important to note that you will not be working in a vacuum. Our program team will be there to provide technical assistance and refer you to local resources for areas that your team may not have capacity to cover, and as well as just playing a sort of ongoing supportive role as you're approaching these trainings and designing them for yourself. We will be hosting webinars and online tools for individual or state teams that are not able to make it to the regional workshops. So there'll be some follow-up resources and information for you all sort of moving forward from this meeting. All right, so I'm gonna pause right now. Gave you a lot of information just now, and just wanted to open up to any questions or thoughts that may be floating around right now. All right. Well, not seeing or hearing any, so we'll move on, and we'll certainly have some. Sure, yeah, go ahead.
This is Amy in Oregon. And there was a slide a couple slides ago. I think there was some recommendations for how we can use the curriculum or different modules. And I was just curious as to why the recommendation is that this should be a 2-day training for producers. And I was wondering if you could just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, based off of the content that we have set aside for producer facing events, that's really just an estimation of how long it would really take to really dig through all of it. It's not a strong recommendation by no means. Breaking off components of it, sort of adding them on to other spaces, or really, if you have producers who are willing to spend, maybe a week sort of diving into sections of the content piece by piece, that could work. But we had just thought of 2 days, just given the amount of content that's available, and maybe just not having to pull producers away for too long from their own work. So 2 days was the duration of time that we thought would be best, but by no means it's not a strong recommendation or a necessity for you all. So really whatever makes most sense for producers in your area.
Also, I just wanted to add on there, Tomas, that that also would include like a site visit because that's one of the things we are recommending, and we're trying to do that in a virtual format towards the end of this training. But yeah, having a site visit to help illustrate some of the concepts that we're teaching within the curriculum. So of course the site visit could be optional, but yeah, producers learning from their peers is one of the recommendations, as Tomas had said earlier.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for that question, Amy.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
All right, well, if there's not any other questions, we can move on, and there'll certainly be more time for you all to share some thoughts or questions in the future. Yeah, so right now I'm actually going to be transitioning into a brief video that we have produced by one of our evaluation partners, Carolyn Dimitri from the New York University. And she'll be talking about the producer needs assessment that was used to really build this training as it is now. Just give me one moment.
All right, folks. And this is actually a recording of Carolyn, but she does a really great job of making you feel like she's right here. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Dimitri. Today I'm going to talk to you about the producer needs assessment findings that my colleague Lydia Oberholzer and I conducted when the National Farm to School Network and NCAT began developing their producer training curriculum. So the first part of the needs assessment was to understand the current state of knowledge. To do so, we took a multi-pronged approach. We started by identifying and examining existing data sets that had surveyed farmers and institutions about the possibilities of the farm to school market channel. We next examined the peer-reviewed and grade literature. We conducted a small number of interviews with key stakeholders in August and September of 2019, and we received feedback from the Project Advisory Council. So the first thing I would like to point out to you through these select stakeholder comments, that the response was very positive. There was an indication that farmers were extremely interested in selling their food to schools, but they really just didn't know how to do it, and they were looking for support in the process. And more specifically, they wanted to understand like the tangible aspects of it, like how do you actually do it? Where do you start? How do you find schools? And what kind of resources are available to help them in the process? So based upon the literature, we were able to identify the reasons farmers decided to participate in farm to school market channels. And interestingly, social factors were a really important motivation. Farmers saw that the farm to school market channels were a great way to build relationships with their community, a way to provide healthy food to children, and also to raise public awareness about food and agriculture. But the business aspects really matter too. and that farm to school market channels were seen as a way to diversify their markets and their business portfolio, a way to get stable prices and fair prices, and also that the distribution costs of the farm to school channel were lower. But the obstacles to participating in farm to school markets were many. And related to the market, the first one was that some farmers perceived that prices were low. The volume requirements could be too large or too small, depending upon the scale a particular farmer was producing at. And then obtaining food safety or third-party certification was seen as a gigantic barrier. And I think especially when you think that a lot of the farmers are competing with Cisco or Sodexo, where they have these very streamlined processes, that you can see how this would be hard for farmers to imagine, like how they could actually compete against those giant entities. The other obstacles to participating in farm to school markets were related to the transaction. So how do you bid, or how do you navigate that procurement process? Because schools often have a very bureaucratic system for procurement. And how do you find buyers and sellers? How do you maintain that buyer and seller relationship? And farmers didn't really know what schools wanted or needed, and they were unsure about how the payment situation worked. And so I think these two quotes really highlight two problems, like two of the most common problems. It's like, what does the school want? How often do they want it? And how consistent does the supply need to be? And then also, how do you take that first step and find a school that you could do business with, especially if you were operating in a school district that didn't have a farm to school coordinator. Logistics were perceived as another area that had several problems. And I think a lot of that circled around the fact that farms have raw product and schools can't cook. And so really, what should farmers be bringing to the school? How does it get there? How is it packaged? And what are the storage possibilities? So we came away with some important recommendations for content of the curriculum, and that it should consist of information on pricing, procurement, vendor and marketing requirements, logistics and transportation. As these were identified as like the 4 key areas where farmers really needed more solid and streamlined information. And that it would be really useful to have a decision tree so that farmers could look at this tree and decide, is it better for them to sell to a school, or is it better to sell through an intermediary who then sells to the school? And that the community benefits were an important part of the process, and this should also be highlighted. And that also this curriculum should include case studies, webinars that could be helpful tools for farmers. So in terms of delivery, we, based upon what we saw and learned from our review, is that it's really important for farmers to have reasonable expectations about farm to school markets, and that a farmer should be interested, but not every farmer really will want to use a farm to school market. So if this particular product could make it possible for farmers to understand, like, yes, this is a good market for me, or no, this is not a good market for me, then I think we decided that would be a really important outcome. In addition, the possibilities and the working with schools really, that does vary around the country depending upon what region a farmer and a school would be located in. And it's important to identify these regional differences. And that the training team should consist of people with varied backgrounds. So they needed people who understood food service, other people who understood child nutrition.
So are you gonna
Needed to be someone who understands how to work with farmers. And that leveraging the mentor relationship could be really helpful by pairing experienced farm to school producers with new farm to school producers, so that the experienced ones could be mentors and role models. But it would be really important for the curriculum to meet the needs of these two groups individually. And experiential learning has been proven to be a really effective academic tool. And so incorporating experiential learning into this curriculum along with the classroom learning would really make this a richer experience for producers. And this could include farm trips or role playing, and there are many different ways the experiential learning could be implemented, and that the webinars and written materials should be available for use in the future. So in conclusion, our needs assessment found that there really is great enthusiasm for the curriculum, and that by providing producers with knowledge and skills, they can make a decision about whether they want to enter the farm to school market, and that this type of curriculum could really increase the likelihood of the farmer success for those who do choose to enter the farm to school market. Thank you very much for listening to this, and I hope you enjoy your training curriculum.
We send a thank you to Carolyn for her work in evaluation. One resource, this is Lacey from NFSN again. One resource I wanted to point your attention to related to what Carolyn just shared is in the green folder that you received, you will find a project background. If you flip to page 5 is the needs assessment outcomes report. And there you'll find a really kind of direct outline that were identified through Carolyn and Lydia's work and preliminary evaluation, and where they're addressed within the. That might help you think about, as you're thinking about your training, you think about what are the key areas that might need particularly addressed within the producer populations that you're working. Content might be addressed within the curriculum to help you really hone in and customize your training for the folks that you plan to work with. So as Carolyn discussed, the assessment, the big picture that they were taking were really learning from information from all over the country. We want to hear a little bit from you about how this applies directly to your state or your locale. So we're going to launch another poll and would like to hear from you out of those producer training needs that Carolyn identified. What do you see as the most prevalent for your state? We're going to launch and you'll have the option of picking up to 3 producer training priority needs in your state that you might want to think about as you continue to move forward with considering your training. All right, we'll give it another 20 seconds or so for folks to respond. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end our poll and share the results with you. So we see a lot of folks have an emphasis on procurement processes and regulations as a need, as well as relationship building. It's pretty high up there. And vendor and marketing requirements, like the top 3 from, price point as well. Looks like price point's the top one as well. So thanks everybody for sharing that, and just encourage you kind of keep thinking about what is going to be most applicable for the producers that you're working with and that you want to hone in on. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tomas.
Yeah, thank you, Lacey. Yeah, so just to bring it back to the needs assessment findings, following the needs assessment data that was provided, we wanted to make sure that the training approach was one that could best address the barriers and challenges named by producers in a format that would be appropriate for adult learners as well as engaging and useful as possible. So with this in mind, we landed on 5 elements to guide our approach. And we can pull up those elements here. Yeah, so the first of all, the first element was just the farm to school for all, meeting the goal of this program to build the capacity of all agriculture producers to launch or expand efforts to market to schools. And that means making sure that the training approach and curriculum is stakeholder led and informed by those who work closely with producers. With contributions from all project partners, the curriculum we developed is designed to be relevant and accessible to as many producers interested in selling to schools as possible. The second goal was, or element of this was a one size does not fit all and place-based approach. So while learning the overarching goal is farm to school for all, we know that farm to school looks differently by region, by sector, scale, by community, and among so many other things. So the curriculum is rooted in the foundational sort of core concepts of selling to schools, identified through the needs assessment, as well as the project partner expertise, but also, with the flexibility of customizing by region and locale to ensure that the program is grounded in the places where the producer trainings will occur. We identified opportunities throughout the curriculum to evaluate local and regional models and solutions through experiential learning, educational opportunities, such as site visits, as well as case studies, and local producer spotlights, to name a few. Another element is the peer learning element. So both the curriculum and the overall training program include opportunities for peer learning and peer-led experiences, such as panels, facilitated group discussions with seasoned producers, and built-in networking and collaboration opportunities. And then lastly, the element of action planning. So the structural sort of common thread that you will see throughout the curriculum is the concept of action planning. The goal for local producer trainings is that producers will leave with an action plan, including outlined long-term goals for them, short-term strategies, and next steps for adapting their business plan and pursuing schools as buyers. Additionally, state-level trainers will be equipped with a trainer action plan, a tool that's used to help trainers plan and deliver trainings to producers. So you will hear more about that and this action planning concept as we continue on in the week. But for now, I'm actually going to pass it to Tammy to talk a bit more about the trainer toolkit.
Thanks, Tomas. So I hope this background information that you all have received thus far has helped frame how and why we've developed these resources. Sorry, I have a dog snoring in the background, so you might hear a little rumble every once in a while. We have referenced some of these resources today and will continue to do so throughout the training. And I want to start to dig into some of these tools so that you can familiarize yourself with the scope of materials available to help you conduct successful producer trainings. One thing I do need to mention before we start digging into these materials, though, is that apparently there's been a problem with the server that are bringing the farm to school materials is on, and it's an Adobe server that is having issues all throughout the country. So it's not just on the National Farm to School Network's website, but we may have to go over the web materials tomorrow. So I just wanted to preface that there's a lot of materials on the website, but we may not be able to get to see that today. So let's get started with the hard copy of the materials, though. So we use the Trainer's Toolkit to reference all of the training tools and materials available to help state training teams work with producers in their states. And today we're just giving you this high-level overview of the resources at your disposal as trainers, but keep in mind that we are really going to be digging into these materials in more detail over the next 3 days. So the trainer's toolkit is divided into 4 buckets, and those are outlined in your screen, on your screen, and with the different colored bars. You should have received a hard copy of most of these materials in the mail, except for that last bucket, which includes all of the online tools, including all of the entire toolkit, plus some bonus materials such as the case studies and a lot of online links, embedded links within the Facilitator's Guide and Producer Workbook. So the Facilitator Guide is a facilitator-facing resource, and basically what you all will be referencing as you conduct those local producer trainings. The Producer Workbook, the green bar, is to hand out to producers at your local producer workshop. And then finally, that Planning and Outreach Guide are the tools for trainer organizers, and that likely will be yourselves. And then finally, the case studies help illustrate producers and buyers engaged in procuring local foods, with the focus on the needs of farmers that Carolyn just identified in that needs assessment piece. So let's dig into these resources so you can become familiar with how to use them in your trainings. So hopefully everyone received the packet via FedEx. And on your screen is an image of the Facilitator Guide. And here you can hopefully see, I'm holding it up in its print form. So please, as you're getting, as we're going through this, I encourage you to follow along with that hard copy. And Jenny Lee will paste the online link for you to follow along if you didn't get the resource. But like I said, you might not be able to access it because of the server issues that are going on right now. So the Facilitator Guide will assist you in facilitating your local producer training through the use of the curriculum that our team has developed for this project. So let's dig into some of the features in the Facilitator Guide. So the Facilitator Guide has everything you need as a facilitator to review before and reference during your local producer training. The curriculum is organized into 4 training modules, which you can see here on your screen, and along with an introduction and conclusion. We'll be digging into the specifics of these modules over the next few days. The first section of the Facilitator Guide, section 1, provides background information about the project and tips for training producer audiences. The training principles outlined by Tomas earlier are outlined in this section as well, and they're also applied throughout the Facilitator Guide in general. So section 2 contains the curriculum and lesson plans for trainers. And if you turn to page 9, I'm going to turn there myself. You can see a list of the training modules and the topics of those training modules. And if you're looking at this resource online, which I'm not sure you can do right now, there's also links to slide decks and to the detailed curriculum outlines for each module. And Lacey's going to be talking about the curriculum outlines in more detail tomorrow. Each module includes presentation slide decks and detailed lesson plans with talking points, facilitator prompts, and activities that you can use to help producers learn the content. And I want to note here that one of the reasons we developed the training team concept that we've been talking about is that some folks on your team may be better suited to teach certain modules than others. So for example, extension associates might be best at teaching module 4, where we really dig into that price point and the food safety concepts for producers. Folks more experienced with procurement might be better at teaching modules 1 and 2. So your team will have the opportunity to identify those best fits and gaps over the next 2 days. This section also includes specific guidance for each module, including a facilitator background section to help you prepare for teaching this topic at your local producer training. So let's look at an example. If you turn to page 25 of your facilitator guide, and again, I'm going there with you, you'll see on module 1, the outline, which includes those producer learning objectives. That's in the second column there. And then along with that, a list of core concepts that are really specific to this module. And then below the outline, you can see a list of resources to help you learn more about the content within each module. And so we pretty much have this formula outlined within every single module of the training within this section. So if you turn to page 26, you can also see a list of case studies that are relevant to this particular module, as well as the key terms that both you and producers need to get familiar with. And another thing I'll point out on page 26, you can see download the slide deck here. So if you were looking at this online, you would be able to click on the slide deck for this particular module. So now why don't you turn to page 29. And this is a good example of the components featured in the lesson plans to support you as a facilitator for each slide in each module of the training. So there is this, as you can see here on the top left, there's a thumbnail of the slide from the corresponding presentation slide decks. And then each slide includes what we're suggesting as the talking points for that particular slide. And they're intended to support, diverse teaching approaches and help you minimize reading from the slides, but you don't need to read from them verbatim. The talking points are really meant to simply provide guidance for you. You're welcome to change the talking points in your own slide decks, and we encourage you to do so. And then finally, at the end of this particular slide 9, you can see the facilitator prompt. And that emphasizes particularly important information and instruction techniques to keep the content actionable for your producers that you're working with. And then if you look onto slide 10, you can see this regionalization tip. And that indicates content areas that should be presented with local and/or regional examples and information. And we strongly encourage you to customize the training as much as you can for your specific audience. We just had somebody asking a question about culturally relevant products, and this would be wherever those regionalization tips are, that's where we would encourage you to include that type of information. And we strongly encourage you to customize those for your training and any kind of audience that you're working with. And then we'll be providing you with guidance on how you can do this and flagging where it might be relevant as we go over each module in the next few days. So if you turn to page 33 of the facilitator guide, I wanted to also point out that we've developed a lot of suggested applied activities throughout this curriculum. And you can see an example of the facilitator guidance for those applied activities on this slide 17 on page 33. The activities are flagged in yellow in this guide as well as in the corresponding slide decks. And they include instructions and materials and tools and suggest reflection questions to help connect content to the producer workbook that we'll be talking about here in a minute. In many cases, the activities are really based on the worksheets from the producer workbook, which will be, like I said, we'll be reviewing that next. Another thing I wanted to point out is there's quite a few appendices in the facilitator guide. So if you turn to page 108. It's directly after our glossary, which is on page 105. And I think that's also a really important tool that is not necessarily in the appendices, but it's an important thing to flag. And it includes all of the key terms that are in the modules in the first section of each module. The appendices includes extra resources for you and maybe actually better accessed online, because many of them include links to some of the online resources that we encourage you to check out. The facilitator tools and resources are broken down by module, as you can see. So as you know, in module 1, we're calling them digging deeper resources, and those facilitator tools are broken down in Appendix A, and then Appendix B includes a list of producer-specific resources that are important for you to familiarize yourself with, because you'll be going over them throughout the curriculum. And then finally, Appendix C gives you some optional modules that are relevant to our training, but they were a little too long to include. We just have so much material. So this might be, we have a fish to school resource as well, and that's, very region specific, definitely region specific in our Western region, as well as some of the content from Module 1. That is optional. And then Appendix D goes over the evaluation guidance that Lydia will be explaining to you on Thursday. And then finally, the last thing I want to point out is on page 139, we are doing that action planning approach, as Tomas was talking about earlier. And there's a copy of your trainer action plan here on page 139, but it's also included in the pocket folder that you receive. So whether you want to just utilize it from the, have everything all in one place in your facilitator guide, or if you want to just take it out and work on it throughout, we just encourage you to just take notes on that. That also, Jenny Lee will be talking about the trainer action plan later on today. And you'll see that some of those concepts are also included in your Jamboards. So that about wraps it up for an overview of the facilitator guide. And we're going to turn to the producer workbook next. But as we take a few minutes to grab that particular resource of the producer workbook, I just want to wait and see if there's any questions that I can answer about the facilitator guide. I see that Jenny Lee also pasted the link, and I'm not sure, can somebody, I'm going to try to bring it up too, just to see if we can get, if the website's coming back up. Nope, it's not.
It's not up yet, but we're working on putting together a folder quickly so that you can have access to the materials virtually. So it won't be quite the same experience yet. We'll get there, but at least you can have those if you don't happen to have the hard copy. So we'll get that link out to you momentarily here.
Great. And thanks to Mika for letting me know. All right. And so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So let's turn to the producer workbook. And it has this little, I'm going to hold it up here. Has the green bar on the top. So like I said earlier, the producer workbook is that producer-facing resource for your local producer trainings. And this is what you'll hand out to producers who attend your trainings. We wanted the producer workbook to truly be more of a workbook. So there isn't as much text, you'll see that here, but there are a lot of activities and worksheets in the workbook. We did organize a workbook so that it corresponds with each module, however, but we do want it, you know, if it just needs to be a standalone resource without the modules, that's also fine. Oh, excuse me, did somebody have a question?
Fiona?
Yes. Did you have a question? I guess not. Okay. Okay. So each module includes that outline, but it's more in an abbreviated form. And we want producers, the goal of that outline is to have a quick glance guide at what topics are included in that section, as well as a list of resources to help them understand the concepts in that particular module. And you can see an example from the introduction, the Power of Farm to School, on your screen. So if you turn to page 10 of the producer workbook, you can see an example of one of those producer worksheets. This is a producer worksheet from module 1. And each module, as I had mentioned, has one or more worksheets, and many of which will correspond with those applied activities that are outlined in your lesson plans. It's important for you as facilitators to become familiar with those worksheets so that you can help producers if they have questions about the worksheets or any of the activities during the training. So you can review them within the producer workbook. They're also on the website under producer resources, and we'll go over that tomorrow since we're not going to get a chance to do that today. So if you turn to page 21, let's turn to page 21 of the producer workbook. And I just wanted to point out, this is an abbreviated version of one of the many case studies that we've done for this project. And we'll go over some of those case studies when we look at the more in-depth case studies when we are looking at the web page. And we included these case studies in the workbook to help provide producers with some kind of context and a practical application of the concepts from that particular module. And then also I wanted to point out the appendices that start on page 52. So if you turn to page 52, the first appendices is the School Business Action Planning Guide. And that is something that Jenny Lee will be talking about tomorrow, and we'll be going in depth. But this is something that our producers will be referring to throughout the training. Even though this key resource of this, the Action Planning Guide, it's in this workbook in Appendix A, you might want to consider as trainers printing this off, because producers are going to be toggling back and forth between the action plan and the workbook during their training. So Jenny Lee will talk about how this resource is going to help producers organize their goals and next steps as they move through the training that you're going to be presenting to them. And we also, I wanted to mention that we have a supplemental online training for you all to help producers work through this action planning document. And that is also on the Bringing the Farm to School site. So if you feel like you, even after this workshop, you need a little bit more information on that, and also examples of producers and how they've applied goal setting to their school sales, that's a great webinar to refer to. So the case studies in the workbook, as I mentioned, were more like an abbreviated form of a series of case studies that our team has done of producers and other supply chain leaders engaged in farm and school sales. And these case studies are in multiple formats, and they feature producers that have addressed some of those challenges identified in the needs assessment. They are in the form of a written 2 to 3 page document. Also, we've developed some podcasts and videos. They live online, and we'll be sure, we're asking you to be sure to point producers to these useful resources as you're going through your training, or maybe you might have some localized resources to share. But the whole idea is that we want you folks to have the opportunity to share producers that are engaged in school sales to make it not so intimidating and have a peer learning concept. The next resource I want to talk about is this planning and outreach guide. And there's a purple band across the top on the online version, but the version you received in the mail doesn't have it, but it says planning and outreach guide. And it is not spiral bound. So the planning and outreach guide is everything you as a trainer will need to plan, execute, and do outreach for a local producer training. And many of the tools in this guide, well, actually all of the tools in this guide are online and can be downloaded by yourself as a trainer or any trainer organizers that you're working with. And this hard copy is a great resource to kind of understand what all is going on in the planning and outreach for your trainings. But again, it's probably best shared online. So let's just take a look at the table of contents. So that's just on page 2. And as you can see, the table of contents shows that you have lots of event planning and checklists and logistics checklists. We have a budget template that's also online. It's in an Excel template. As well as lots of templates to help with those outreach pieces. So if you turn to page 16 through 18 of the guide, I just want to point out some really great, amazing formatted materials that Anna Mullen, the communications director from National Farm to School Network and National Center for Appropriate Technologies graphic designer Amy Smith developed for trainers to use for outreach. These materials, again, they're all available online, and you can click the embedded links within the table of contents to access them. And they're also, another really awesome thing about them is that they're you can adjust them and adapt them. They're for, titling your training and all of that kind of stuff. And that's actually the perfect segue to talk about the online interface. But at this point, since I can't access the online resource, we'll start our day off tomorrow by going through the online resources and how to access those materials online. But in the meantime, I encourage you to check out the Google folder that Jenny Lee developed for you to look at in the interim. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the materials. Cheryl, I see a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I am curious, the curriculum is amazing, for one. Thank you so much. It's so comprehensive. But I'm curious, did you get any feedback about doing the entire curriculum versus getting growers with appropriate need to know certain information in certain modules, and whether if you do a training with just, let's say, one module to meet the needs of a certain group of growers, is that effective, or is it better to really try to encourage people to do much more than that? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we get that comment or question almost this is our fourth regional facilitator workshop. So yeah, as Tomas had mentioned, we encourage you know the producers that you're working with. So, and you'll see as we go through the modules in more detail tomorrow and Wednesday, there are opportunities to kind of pick and choose pieces of the curriculum and certain modules. So for example, Module 1 talks about the child nutrition programs, and that might be better suited for like an introduction to the farm to school and school sales. And then Module 4 really talks about how to understand price point, what are those key tools to understand price point, as well as understanding or having different enterprise specific content. So there's livestock content, and you wouldn't want to be teaching the livestock materials if you had a group predominantly made up of crop producers, right? So yeah, that's where it's important to, as a trainer, to understand and pick and choose what materials work best for your audience. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I just know as a grower for so many years, you kind of almost have to, I will use the word lightly, but trick growers into coming to some of these trainings and making it relevant to what they need at the moment. And then suddenly the questions get asked. And so you start building that up to where it could be a much more comprehensive training. So as long as, and it seems like each module could be certainly stand on its own. So thank you for that. It's really helpful.
Yeah, and we appreciate your experience as a grower and bringing that to the teams that you're working with too, because I think that really helps a lot in the organization and making sure that there's relevant examples and such being explained in your local or state producer trainings.
Thank you.
Questions? All right, well, we do have a break right now, and we are actually right on time, which is so awesome. I love it when it ends up like that. And then after the break, we're going to be joined by Kyle Flack and Shelly Musil, and they are going to be talking about the producer perspective of selling to the Coopville School District in Washington State. So as part of designing peer-led and experiential training, we recommend that trainers include at least one panel or facilitated group discussion featuring local farmers and school representatives during each local producer training that you host. And these discussions create an important opportunity for incorporating local context, answering specific marketing questions, and addressing common misconceptions about selling to schools. And these panels can also function as networking opportunities between and amongst producers and school buyers. So we encourage you folks as trainers to customize the panel for your producer audience. And today we'll be hearing from two producers in Washington State on Whidbey Island. But in some states, it might make sense to have like a food hub or a third-party aggregator if that's relevant. So keep in mind that the panel composition can change and depends on the locale and what producers in your locale need to hear. And we also have more guidance on how to plan panels at your local producer trainings in the facilitator guide. So just take a look at page 111 in your facilitator guide for more guidance on that. So today's panel is more, we're targeting areas relevant for trainers to consider that you use as planning for your, sorry, that I got that mixed up a little bit. So today we're going to be having a facilitator dialogue with our panelists, and then we'll have an opportunity for question and answers at the end. And we want you folks to consider, using some of the questions that we're asking or highlighting some of the areas that are relevant for you as you are thinking about your local producer training. So kind of keep those things in mind. We will have the opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And if you have any burning questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat so you don't forget them. And then we'll incorporate those as we go along as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and to provide an overview of their farm to school work. Today we have Kyle Flack joining us from Bell's Farm on Whidbey Island. And then we also have Shelly Muzzle from Three Sisters Beef and Family Farm also joining us. They are both, as I mentioned, they're both based on Whidbey Island, and they sell their products to the Coopville School District. It's great to see you both and have you with us today. And let's start with Shelly and see if she can just give us a quick overview. And I have the slide deck to show here. Lacey, are you on by chance? Oh, okay, she's starting to, there we go. Oh, there we go. All right, Shelly, are you with us?
I am. Thank you so much for including me in your wonderful workshop. It sounds great. As you heard, I'm Shelly Mazzal from Oak Harbor, Washington, which is on Whidbey Island. And we have a farm here that raises basically all proteins. So we raise beef, hogs, lamb, chicken for both eggs and meat production. I'm just going to give you a little rundown about the farm. We're raising probably about 800 acres. And with that, then, like I said, producing the different animals. And you guys throughout the day ask questions if I don't answer what you want. On the scale of a small farm, we're probably on the little bit larger side versus the small, more homestead type farms, but we're certainly not the big commercial farms. So working with the schools has its benefits, but also has some downfalls. And hopefully we can chat about some of those as we go. Some of the things that we do, we raise animals birth to butcher. We grow all of our own feed, mill our own grains, try to do rotational grazing with our pastures, low impact tillage, no-till to cut back on carbon sequestration, things like that. I can answer any of those types of questions as we go if anyone is interested in that. Diversification. I sell to grocery stores on Whidbey Island. I also have a product line that we'll talk about in length on hot dogs and pepperoni. So a processed line that is a distributed product that then goes all over the state of Washington in some of the specialty grocery stores and goes to some of the different school districts. So besides the Coopville School District, I've also sold into Oak Harbor and Cordes and the Greater Seattle School District with the hot dogs. So volume, frequency depends on the school and what they're doing. Like I said, we'll get into that potentially as we answer some of the questions. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. Like I said, 5th generation farm. My husband works on the farm. The girls work on the farm. Everybody has their own area. Husband is pretty much all crops. One of the girls is all animal production. One of them is a store manager, and I'm pretty much all wholesale. So hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you.
Great, great. Thanks, Shelley. And Kyle, are you, there you are. Could you just give us an overview of your farm and how you started to get into sales?
Yeah, so I'm Kyle. I'm one of the owners of Bell's Farm, also on Whidbey Island. We are a 65-acre multi-generational farm. We're super diversified, so we grow mixed vegetables, we grow field crops, we raise beef, lamb, and pork, and we also grow fresh market strawberries. We're 65 acres. So, you know, that's split out between all of those different avenues. So we don't really do any one thing on a huge scale, but our diversity kind of allows us to maintain profitability and it's really good for our marketing. So when my wife and I came back to the farm 5 years ago, we sort of switched cold turkey from conventional production practices to regenerative practices, and so we don't use any synthetics or you know, any of that kind of stuff on our farm. We sell to the Coopville School District, obviously. We also sell at farmers markets. We have an on-farm stand. We sell through the local food hub, the Whidbey Island Grown Food Hub, and we sell to restaurants. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of who we are.
Great. And so why don't we'll start with you, Kyle, and then Shelley, you can answer after that. And how did you get into selling to schools?
So we're really fortunate here, actually, because the Coopville School District implemented a from scratch food service program, and they hired a food service director who was actually a chef locally here. And I had a really great working relationship with him. So he carried me over, so to speak, when he took over the food school program.
Great. And Shelley, you're the wholesale manager. So how did you decide the route that school sales was a wholesale channel that you wanted to pursue? And also, do you mind if you can turn on your video, that would be great so people can see you.
You're muted.
You're muted, Shelley.
Wow, difficulties here today. Thank you.
Oh, yes, we're all used to it.
Anyways, how did I get involved with the schools? I've sold to them for actually quite a few years now. Coopville and Oak Harbor were the last ones that I've picked up. Like I said, I sold into the greater Seattle school district for quite a few years, especially with we had what was called the Taste of Washington Day. And protein, you know, right off the bat, I'm just going to say protein is expensive for the schools to purchase. So when you're working with your meat producer, you're going to want to really kind of hammer that out right away, what you can afford, how much, and then does your farm have that quantity. But with that being said, one of the best things about selling to the schools is the food awareness, because that way, lots of times the kids can put a farm name, farm face. Our girls went to Oak Harbor School District, and that was fun. And Kyle's wife, Paige, went to Coopville School District. So sometimes you can kind of put that all together, and the families think that that's really neat to have that connection. Healthy food was a big thing, putting healthy food into the schools. That was another big thing for me. When we designed our hot dogs, it was one of those things I never let our kids eat those before. And when we headed down that path, it was one of those things I wanted to have a really nutritious hot dog for kids without a bunch of fillers and things like that. Well, then that's taken off because the school districts then could pick that up because of the nutritional value in it. Kids like to tell their folks about what they got to eat at school. So that's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I always, for when my son is at school and I'm looking at the hot dog as like the menu item for the day, I'm like, no, I don't think you should have the hot lunch. So it's great to see that there's healthy options there. So I was wondering if you could talk about like some of those initial steps that you took when you started selling to schools. Like, what were those steps? It sounds like, Kyle, you had somebody reach out to you because you had a prior relationship, and Shelley, that taste of Washington was one of those initial steps. So what happened after that?
I think for us, it takes a decent amount more planning for a school to, especially produce, to purchase produce, because unlike a restaurant where they've got a ton of flexibility, a school just really doesn't. They've got to feed a ton of people. Usually our menu planning months and months in advance, whereas a restaurant is like a week. So it definitely took, I think, sort of just having that openness of, you know, recognizing that this is not going to be, I send him something on Monday morning and he orders on Thursday. This isn't like a normal restaurant situation. So, you know, it took quite a few phone calls actually to sort of figure out what kinds of things they would need. And then like Shelley was saying, the quantities that are practical for them to purchase. I mean, as much as I think a lot of the schools would love to, they can't order, you know, 5 pounds of something. It just doesn't make sense for their program. And they've got really a lot of times inflexible budgets. So, you know, it took a lot of, I think, game planning and strategizing with the food service director to kind of sit down and figure out what makes sense, what can they afford, and what can they use, you know, what's something that they can use, that they can feature in their school, you know, because that helps them sort of get the word out about scratch-based food programs.
Right. I think on the protein side of it, one thing that you have to really remember right off the bat is you have to have USDA certified meats. So I think it's great to find a farmer that potentially has enough animals that they're butchering on a year-round basis, because that's the other thing is sometimes, you know, you have a farmer that's raising, let's say, beef, but if they don't butcher often enough, the volume's not going to be there. And once again, feeding children takes a lot of product to do. Also, like with the hot dogs and stuff, I have to be somewhat careful because I have a 1/4 pound hot dog. Well, that's too many ounces for the school program. Then I have an 8-pack of hot dogs that is 12 ounces. So that is almost too small for middle school and high schoolers, perfect for grade schoolers. So some of those types of things you're going to really want to watch. The ground beef is an easy one because you can spread that out over, you know, spaghetti, sloppy joes, whatever you want to do. But to try to pull out a full meatloaf out of a local producer is probably going to be cost prohibitive. Also, things like fillers, additives, all that kind of stuff. A local farmer is not going to have any of that kind of stuff, but potentially that's what you're working with through your food service, which, as all of you guys already know, how you would figure out your ounces for things like that. So some of those are some things to be thinking about.
Hey, Shelley, can I just piggyback on what you said real quick about, I think that's a great point about the USDA inspected meat. To add to that, I think a lot of school farm to school programs are not necessarily familiar with how that stuff works. They're so used to getting their products through third-party distributors. So like when I first talked to the school program about proteins, they were confused about, you know, who can get this USDA certification. And so one of the creative ways to sort of get meat to them is to sell them whole animals so that they can break down. It's a more cost-effective way for them to use some of the proteins, but it takes a little bit of education because they were sort of apprehensive, like, well, if I get a whole animal, this isn't USDA. So you sort of have to just kind of go through that process of like, no, it's still USDA. It's still got a USDA stamp. It's, you know, you're just getting a whole carcass as opposed to individually packaged cuts.
Right, which is true if a school can handle a whole carcass and if they could pay for it, because that would be expensive and lots of times time is a factor. So it's all what you can find in your local area and working with your local farmer.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point because there are so many different capacities, and we actually will be talking about that on day 3, is like assessing the capacity of the kitchen and the school district that you're trying to sell to, and trying to overlap that with the product that you have available or consider processing it. Shelley, we did have a question. Somebody was wondering if your hot dogs were CACFP creditable.
Well, I have no idea. Like, okay, somebody's got to tell me exactly what that means.
Stormy, do you want to go
Sure.
on?
Hi there. I'm just asking because we're developing recipes for early education or early childhood education centers on our island in Hawaii. And what we're trying to do is work with schools that can get reimbursed through the child and adult care food program, because their budgets are typically so low to pay for food. So we're trying to develop recipes that can be reimbursed. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you know what? I do not know the answer to that. When I sell protein into the school, whether it's the ground beef or the hot dogs, I end up just getting paid for it. Chris Iberly from the Washington State Food School Program, I think is his title, would be one that might have an answer for you on that.
And Chris is here too right now. He just answered another question, so he can feel free to go off mute as well.
Well, I hate to do this and pass the buck to somebody else, but I mean, like Shelley kind of implied, right? That's a responsibility of the CACFP providers and sponsors. And I think, Stormy, to kick it to you, or maybe somebody from USDA, or maybe even Lacey Stevens, it kind of depends on which part of crediting you're asking about. Are you asking about serving sizes, or product formulation, or sodium content, or which meal pattern requirement it's meeting, right? Those are all parts of the crediting process that I'm also not necessarily an expert in. But so that calculation, right, is happening when a school district buys like Shelley's hot dogs. How does this credit? And there's a lot of resources out there for that, and maybe there might be somebody that's better prepared than I am to answer that.
I was just going to pipe in. It's Jessica from USDA FNS. Thank you, Chris. I think you gave a great explanation. And just a further resource, I'll put my email in the chat, but we have a whole CACFP team here at the Western Region office, and they would definitely be able to get the nuance of your question and either get you the answer or point you to the right answer in terms of your state agency or whomever. So I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm happy to kind of funnel that through the right channels.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're networking and making connections here. That's awesome. Okay, so the next question I had for you, so did you have any perceptions before you started? Kyle, you talked about this a little bit, about accessing school sales or connecting with school buyers that you actually found that wasn't actually true? And how have you been able to work through some of those perceptions as you access the school sales? I'll ask you, Kyle, and then Shelley, if you want to.
Yeah, I think, you know, my perception was really ignorance was my perception. I didn't know anything about school sales. So I went off what I know, which is wholesale sales to restaurants, which is a whole different animal. And it's, you know, chefs are kind of a pain in their own way, but at least it's a short turnaround. And so it's a quick business for me. And so the school program was definitely, you know, something that we had to work through, which I actually found incredibly refreshing. A lot of times chefs have no interest in sort of, you know, having the farmer help them plan a menu. And so I think that to me has the potential for really great partnerships with the community. That was something that I found, like I said, really refreshing, that you can sit down with the food service director and say, okay, well, I need to feed, you know, X amount of kids, and what can you do in January? Okay, well, you're not going to get tomatoes. So those kinds of conversations, but it allows me to plan, you know, large crops of storage crops that I can have a secure outlet for. So, you know, the upside has the potential to be really good.
Yeah, I would add a few things, once again, on the meat side of it. Working with the schools, kind of like what Kyle said, the school is different from the restaurant, which is different from the grocery store, which is different from the retail end of it. So you just have to kind of take it as it is. The biggest thing that I always tell everybody is you got to plan ahead. You got to find a butcher, a farmer that's working year round so that you have year round products. Then you just need some lead time. Once again, with the protein, I'm just going to say this again, it's very expensive for the school. So what I like to do is special events, special days. You know, it's a harvest week, it's harvest month, it's Taste of Washington Day. Those are the types of things that we really like to do. The Coopville School District has a very, very unique school program, where we do have a chef that literally wants to try to do everything local. He has built his own garden over there. So that it is a super unique thing. And he's willing to work with me on the different products and switches back and forth between the hot dogs and the ground beef. A little bit of stew meat sometimes is sold, but price point is big. But if you want to do this, find somebody that you can work with that has a quantity that can do it year round. That's really the key thing.
Yeah, and Shelley, I know you mentioned processing, and I'm just wondering if there are some other barriers that you experienced when you started selling to schools, and how you address them. And then Kyle, if you could answer that same question.
You know, there weren't a lot of barriers. We were already up and going. It's not quite, you know, like the vegetables, they have to really plan to have their growing season as X, Y, and Z, where I'm processing year round with the beef. But that is one of those things that you're going to really want to talk to your farmer about. Are you butchering year round, and do you have that product in that quantity that will support what the school wants? Like I said, otherwise go back to special events, because that really works well. You can really plan for that.
Yeah, I would just, I think the quantity issue, especially for produce, is sort of a challenge that needs to be accounted for, I think, for both parties, the producer and the food service program, because I think that, you know, trying to that's always a challenge, I think, for small scale farms and resilient food systems, which is a whole nother thing. But being able to sort of plant, crop plan, especially for storage crops when you're a small scale farmer, is really tricky. And so, it does take just a lot. I think, again, I'm just going to keep harping on communication. It takes a ton of communication to figure out, do you have the product? Will you have the product? And then also that sort of making sure that everyone is crystal clear that yes, you should have the product, but it's something that's growing in the ground, right? And so things can change, and especially with fresh market vegetables, yeah, once they're in storage, they're fine. But until then, if we have a hard freeze early or a lot of rain early or something like that, that can affect the crop or the yield, schools need to sort of be willing to take a little bit of that risk, and I think that's something that requires a little bit of give and take.
Yeah, great. Yeah, those relationship building piece is super important. We actually have a couple of questions from the folks in the audience. So Ray was wondering how much you folks have worked with the Coopville Farm to School program, and if they helped facilitate the procurement process. And if those folks at the Coopville Farm to School program are a local resource for farmers, or did you just work directly with the schools?
My wife is actually on the board of Coopville Farm to School. They were not a part of the procurement process. The Farm to School program just hired a farm manager, garden manager. So it's actually been a little bit of reversed. A lot of the local farmers have been a resource for the Farm to School program. But I do think it seems like that program might be headed in the direction of, they're hopefully the primary provider, especially of mixed vegetables, of the food service program. And then it would seem logical and natural to me that they would be probably the go-between, to source whatever in addition.
Yeah, I've worked directly with the chef, the head of the school program.
Great. And then for Maya from EcoTrust, wanted to see if you folks could talk about how you went about evaluating whether selling to schools was viable for you and your farm business. And then what types of analysis did you do to help make those decisions?
For me, it's kind of an ongoing process. I grew a ton of different crops, and just to be perfectly honest, I'm never going to get a premium price going through the school, and that's okay. But I think the benefit could be, and is to some degree already, the stability of knowing that I have an outlet for a large amount. And so I think it's more, I try to tailor what I'm selling to the school to things that are already selling well for me, so that I can sort of, I know that I'm getting a margin in my other outlets that is profitable for me, and then I can scale up, and a lot of times that gives me a little bit more of efficiency of scale, and then sort of use that as an outlet for those larger crops that I grow.
I think for me, having really good communication with the different heads of the school districts in the food program is really key. And then them giving me enough lead time. They ask me, can I get the 100, 200 pounds of ground beef, whatever it is, or the 600 hot dogs, 1,200 hot dogs, whatever it is. That's the biggest thing. It's just having a relationship with them where you can just send emails, 2-3 emails back and forth, and you're good to go. Like I said, protein's expensive. I give them wholesale or even below my wholesale costs, just to have good food in the school program.
And then Cheryl had a question. So what would be different in your approach in selling if the school district near you did not have a robust program, and like say you needed a little bit more convincing to sell to them? Would you adjust your approach, or would you not sell to them at all, or how would that go?
I think I would probably, I'm gonna try and sell anybody I can. My approach would be, I think, what our strengths always are as small local farmers, which is resiliency, road miles, environmental impact. So those would be my go-to approaches to convincing a school program to either A, pay more, or B, have a little bit more of a process than going through, Cisco or US Foods, or both. I think, the only way that you're going to convince them of that is by convincing them of the other sort of hidden benefits.
I think with that question, yeah, with the hot dogs, I already have a distribution in place. So that works well to go to some of the school districts, like the Seattle School District, because they already purchased from that distribution. The local schools, I already have a route that I make deliveries with. If it gets too far out of where I would deliver, or it's somewhere that the distribution doesn't go, that would be really hard, because like I said, trying to keep the price down, and you might have to raise the price, and it's not gonna really work. At that point, then I would try to help them, is there another meat producer that I know of that they could access that might work for a special event or something like that? That's one thing. Farmers know other farmers. So ask around, find a butcher shop that is a USDA inspected shop that you could ask them and see if they had any recommendations for farmers. If you really wanted a certain thing, I want to sell pork something, maybe they know somebody that's a larger hog producer or something like that. So that's what I would do.
Great. And I love how Kyle was giving a values pitch, because we are going to be doing a values pitch activity on day 3. So you folks get ready. Hopefully you are all taking notes there. Amy Gilroy from Oregon asks about your contracting or guarantee from what does your contracting or guarantee of purchase with the schools look like? Is it basically a written contract, or do you have just a verbal agreement with the Coupeville School District?
I just, with the Coupeville School District, I just have a good, like a verbal good faith agreement with them. Part of that is because we're really familiar with the school district. We know everybody there, so we have a pretty good belief that nobody's going to operate in bad faith. So, but before COVID, I actually did have a tentative contract with the Oak Harbor schools, and that's for me all I need. I'm not somebody that needs like a hard contract. I just need a good faith agreement, and so I just had a good faith agreement from the Oak Harbor School District in writing, and of course that went out the window because that was like a month and a half before the school shut down.
I've had both, just like Kyle said, with Coupeville. It's a really small school, so it's pretty much on a handshake. Oak Harbor is a little bit more. Sometimes things are in writing, but yeah, I've had to cancel on her because the product didn't get made in time, so the hot dogs didn't get made in time. So I had to cancel on her. And then during COVID, I had a huge order with her and she canceled on me. So you know what? It's a two-way street. You just got to be flexible. Seattle school districts, lots of times we've had more information in writing. So it just depends on the schools that you're working with. I really do love my small schools where it's just a phone call or an email. It works great, but I think that's what you're dependent on a school district.
So as I told you and Kyle before the training, this is kind of like a train the trainers. So these folks that we're talking with are going to go on to train producers. So what are a couple of issues that you think trainers should focus on when they're training producers on how to sell to schools?
You mean issues that producers might have, or you mean things that producers
Like
might?
what are some of the top questions or issues that you might have had as you were starting to sell to schools yourselves that you wish producers knew and that these trainers can share with the producers they're working with?
I would definitely say that the process is so different than most other sales outlets that you're going to find on your own, like farmers markets, farm stands, restaurants. Those are a much, more fluid environment. And so I think the value for me would be sort of having a framework to navigate those systems and to also communicate with the food service program and start that ball rolling of like, what can you do? What can we do? What do you need? What are the timelines that you look at? Like all of those questions, I didn't know,
Yeah, I have some of the same ones, things like you really got to figure out a price right up front so that everybody's on board with that. The volume thing is huge because it's really an honor to have a school district come to you and go, we would like to buy your product. And you're like, that's so awesome. How much do you want? And then if you cannot supply that, that's a huge issue. So you got to be able to manage the volume. If you can't, is there an alternative? Work with the people because there might be an alternative that they have. I want stew meat already cut up, but I don't have that, but we do have a whole bunch of roasts. Well, maybe the school district could cut that themselves into, once again, the size that they want. That portion thing is huge. Open communication would be the biggest thing, but that's with everybody. I think that's all around a good thing. Lead time is huge. The other thing is kind of that wholesale versus retail. Sometimes the farmer wants to get a little bit stuck on this is what I get at the farmer's market, and I think I should be able to get that through a school district. Well, school districts can't afford that. So sometimes that's something that needs to be discussed right up front.
And I wanted to provide, we have like just a few minutes left. So I wanted to open it up and see if other folks have questions. I really appreciate your questions coming in via the chat, but feel free to take yourself off mute and ask questions to our awesome panelists as well.
Hi there. We work with a number of underrepresented, socially isolated farmers. And I am wondering if within the work that you have done and the farmers that are also engaged in your farm to school sales, like what percentage might you say, if are farmers of color?
That are selling to the school district? Probably very few. I don't know. I have no idea, but I would say it's probably really low.
I know we do have a Hispanic farm that is a beginning farm program over in the Skagit Valley here in Washington. And it's called Viva Farms. And that might be one that would be a great one for folks to reach out to if you want to find more out about that question, because I know they do have some minorities it's a beginning farmer program for minorities. So that might be something. It's Viva, VIVA Farms.
And they also have they actually have a farm to school program coordinator too. So.
Thank you.
Any other last minute questions before?
Yeah, I don't, I'm fairly new to this. So I was wondering if you had experience with schools that don't have access to producing facilities. And if so, were you able to assist them with finding producing facilities? And I don't know if that's.
What do you mean by producing facilities?
So you had mentioned, Shelley had mentioned maybe they could purchase, oh, I think it was Shelley, sorry, that they could purchase like a whole animal and then produce it for saving costs in that fashion. What if they don't have access at the school site to be able to do that? Do you have experience with helping them find those producing sites, or is that something that would maybe be more on the school end to help them find those producing areas?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kyle's the one that mentioned that, but no, that's fine. You know, schools like Coopville that are, I mean, this is a serious thing over there that they're really trying to find these full on local meals and all this kind of stuff. And Andreas, he's trained, he's a chef, he's a trained chef. So for him, that's not a big deal. Now, most of the schools that I work with, there are some schools like even like the Oak Harbor School District has just remodeled their kitchen. Some of them had gotten so institutional, they couldn't make anything on their own. And I mean, I'm not dissing anyone's schools. Please don't take that wrong. But there's some of them that are not able to make some of those things. Then there are these ones, I think it's the future that they will go back to a little bit more. I'm going to call it home cooking, and we'll be able to potentially do a little bit more of a breakdown, maybe like a primal cut of meat versus just here's a pound of hamburger kind of thing. Have I helped anybody with that? I haven't helped anybody. All the schools have been able to manage what I have, but like I said, mine has been pretty much the hot dogs, the hamburger, which is going to be your little bit more lower end product in the protein world. And it's what kids eat too. I mean, let's just face it. This is what kids eat. They don't want a steak. So
that would get expensive at the school level. Great questions, everybody.
Yeah, so as Tammy mentioned, I'm going to jump in and talk about the trainer action plan. And for those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Jenny Lee Harris, and I'm with National Farm to School Network. So the trainer action plan, if you look on the next slide, we have the trainer action plan screenshot there. And this is located in two places for you to look at right now. One is in your materials folder. If you got that in the mail prior to the workshop, you'll see it's a printed copy of Appendix G, the trainer action plan. It's also located on page 139 of the facilitator guide. So it's that last resource and appendix in the facilitator guide, if you're looking at it there as well. We wanted to provide folks with this separate printed copy so you can more easily write in it and refer to it alongside the other resources throughout this week, if that's your approach. And we developed this action plan for trainers to really help pull many of those big picture components of planning into one place. So you're going to be spending a lot of time with this resource throughout the workshop and in your state breakout teams. And the purposes of this trainer action plan are really twofold. So one is to model the producer action planning that's going to occur during the producer trainings that you'll be hosting. And two, it's really to assist you in assessing your training team's strengths and gaps and identifying those important next steps towards planning your local producer trainings. So right now I'm going to go over the structure of this document of the trainer action plan and how it functions alongside other resources. So the first part of the trainer action plan is a team assessment. And this is really a checklist of items that start on that page 139 or the front part of the printed copy. It ends on the next page as well, on page 140. And the checklist is organized, you'll see, into 6 buckets. So know the content, build your training team, make it local, plan your agenda, identify and reach your audience, and plan for action. And so this assessment, again, is really intended to support each state training team in determining potential knowledge gaps, as well as assess familiarity with the training tools and the overall comfort with the planning, outreach, and facilitating process. And again, throughout this week, you're going to be working through these buckets and completing the assessment checklists in your state breakouts. So the second part of the resource includes the action plan table. So if you flip the page and are looking at page 140 and 141, this is where teams are encouraged to insert those necessary action steps, the corresponding timeline, as well as any additional resources or tools needed to successfully plan and host a local producer training in your state. And the idea is that the filled out action plan, in conjunction with the planning and outreach guide, which is that third resource booklet that Tammy mentioned earlier today. We're going to dig into that in more detail later in the week. But those 2 pieces will really become your blueprint for planning and preparing your local producer training. So you're going to be generating a lot of content that can go into this action plan during this week. And you'll also see screenshots of tables that look just like this, pulled from this resource in your Jamboards that you're going to be using this week. So we really have this trainer action plan in multiple formats in this setting, really to support whatever brainstorming and action planning works best for your group, whether it's collective virtual note taking on the Jamboard or writing down your ideas on this on your own action plan, or of course, some combination of both. So it's really those 2 pieces, the assessment checklist and then the action plan table to put in those next steps. So we're going to just look at a quick example. So for each topic area, it's important to start with that team assessment and then move to the action plan table. So in this example, the state group has gone through the checklist and checked off which statements are true for their members. And in this case, members have a broad knowledge and expertise spanning child nutrition programs, as well as working with producers. But at this point, the team is maybe less familiar or at the beginning stages of understanding how to access and navigate the resources found in the trainer's toolkit for this program. And so I suspect that this might be where a lot of teams are right now, and that's okay. So let's look at the action plan table then. So the state group, after they've done this assessment, would come to the action planning table for know the content. And most of these action steps for this bucket in particular are just pretty straightforward, right? The group is going to want to take some time early on in the planning process to sit down, familiarize themselves with all the training materials, go over the module content in detail, look at all the additional resources that the material or that the program, the training program provides. And our goal with this workshop is to really work through those pieces and make sure each state leaves this week with a solid understanding of what the materials are, how they work together, how to access and share them, and how to use them. And again, of note, the planning and outreach guide is really an excellent tool to review in tandem with the trainer action plan, because it includes a detailed checklist for planning and preparing your producer training that does align with this action plan and provides myriad action steps that you're going to likely want to include in your action table. And as both Lacey and I mentioned earlier, to facilitate group brainstorming and support action plan development in a virtual setting, we're going to be using Jamboard. And so you've seen each breakout group has their own set of boards. And again, the Jamboards are aligned with both the workshop agenda and the trainer action plan format that we just walked through. So before we transition into our second breakout for the day, are there any initial questions about the trainer action plan? Okay, it's pretty straightforward, but if you do have questions, feel free to ask. Your facilitators will know as well in your breakout groups. So on this last slide here, these are this is what you're going to see for the and work on for this last breakout today. We're going to be building off earlier conversations and focusing on the building your training team bucket identified in the trainer action plan. So we're going to be looking at boards 4 and 5 and really thinking through, who is on our team, who and they may not already be on the call, they may not be at the table today, but who in your state makes sense and has the knowledge and skills to be able to train producers on the different module contents. And so you'll see the modules are broken out here, modules 1, 2, 3, and 4 by content areas. And we're really asking teams today to brainstorm, who is the best sort of group, person, agency, organization to deliver that content area and see where the gaps and strengths are for moving forward in your planning process. So Carlos, I will hand it over to you to break us out into our groups.
Jenny,
oh yeah.
Hey, actually the web page is up and running again. So we decided really quickly to shift before we go into our breakout sessions. I'm gonna do just a real quick overview of the web page, just because it is a critical resource for you folks as trainers. So I'm gonna share my screen and then we'll launch into the breakout sessions. All right, well, hopefully folks can see the Bringing the Farm to School webpage that our wonderful partners at National Farm to School Network have developed. And hopefully, Jenny Lee, do you mind putting this in the chat so folks can follow along if they want? So this first section is basically just an overview of the Bringing the Farm to School project. And you can see here there's an embedded link to just a one-page overview if you wanted to, that's in a PDF. And so if you wanted to print that off for folks that are attending your trainings. This that's happening now piece is will be changed as the phase of the project changes. But right now we're in those regional facilitator workshops. And as you can see, we are almost over halfway through. And we have 3 more trainings left throughout the country. But as we change into phase 4, which is the local producer trainings, this is the place where we can advertise and have registrations and stuff for your local producer trainings here. So, and then this is the meat of that curriculum piece. In this third section here, exploring the training materials. So I'm going to just click on the facilitator resources so you all can see that this is where you can download that online PDF version of the facilitator guide. And as you can see, here are those slide decks that I was talking about. So let's just go to the facilitator guide here. And one nice thing here, the table of contents is off here to the left. Let's just go to module 1. And as you can see in module 1, there some of the materials, the videos, it lists the activities, but all of those embedded links are available here within the document. Here you can also, those digging deeper resources are also embedded. Okay, so let me also just look at, I wanted to show you Appendix A. So remember I mentioned those facilitator tools earlier on, and here all of those digging deeper resources for facilitators are all embedded here. So it's really useful to utilize the online version. And let's go back. You can always get back here in this red bringing the farm to school. That'll bring you back to that homepage. And let's look at the producer resources. So here you can download the full producer workbook, and the action planning guide that I was talking about in the appendices is right here. And then all of the worksheets. So say you want to just look at the worksheets as a trainer, you can download a copy of the worksheets right here, and instead of like flipping through each module to find like module 1 worksheet. So I wanted to point that nice tool out. So let's go over to module 1 again. Again, the producers can access the slide decks from the online version of the producer workbook, the case studies, embedded links to the online version of the case studies, and here, let's go up a little bit here. And here are those, here's the worksheet. And one nice thing about the worksheet that is here, I'm going to actually, and important links there. One thing I wanted to point out with these worksheets with the workbook is this digging deeper section. So this is a lot of extra resources that producers can access based on the topic of that particular module. So it's a great place to, if producers are just like, I need more information, or I can't find those, the spreadsheets that you're talking about in module 4, all of that stuff is in this digging deeper section. So that was something I wanted to point out. So I want to show you really quick an exciting thing about the producer workbook worksheets here. These are actually, you can, they're PDFs that you can fill in the blanks. So this is a great thing to also have producers that if they want to have just an online version and save it, they can use this to fill in and have kind of a typed copy. And especially in module 4, there's actually a risk assessment that they can, on food safety, that they can actually fill out and share with the school district. So that's kind of a nice feature of those. So the last thing I want to show you folks is those case studies that we talked about. And there is a slide that basically shows all the different case studies, but I wanted to show you that here is where you access all the versions of the case study. And we have organized them by type of farm or by the person or entity that we interviewed. So for example, Anthony Youth Farm, we have a written case study in 2 parts, as well as a podcast. If we go down here, we have a case study that our wonderful partner, Amy Gilroy from Oregon Department of Agriculture, helped facilitate a video that is really nicely done with Camas Country Mill and Umi Organic. So that's a really great, nicely produced video. So as you can see, some have 2 different types of formats and some just 1, but this is a great resource to direct your producers to. And so with that, I will stop sharing. and we will take it off into our breakout groups unless there are any other questions about the webpage. All right. Well, Ray is asking if any of the materials will be available in Spanish. And we will be having, some of our partners have actually, on the advisory council, have offered to translate some of these materials in Spanish. There are a lot of materials, as you can tell. So we have been discussing which materials would be best, but definitely parts of the producer workbook as well as the worksheets are the areas that we're considering translating into Spanish. And as you review the materials, we'd appreciate if your suggestions on which materials would be best translated into Spanish for your Spanish speaking producers. All right. Well, please feel free to keep asking questions in the chat and I'll try to answer, or the rest of the team will try to answer as we move along, and we'll get into our last breakout of the day. Carlos?
Alrighty, welcome back, folks. Hopefully that second breakout session of the day was beneficial and advantageous for everyone. So yeah, so we're closing up the day today, and in this wrap up, I just wanted to first just get a sense of how you all are receiving the information. Let's see. And we can do this by just doing a really quick check-in on some of the goals that we had for the day. So if you wouldn't mind, if you can just unmute yourself, or actually no, for this part, let's just quickly do a quick activity. So if you can indulge me. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask 3 questions and just give me a thumbs up if you have sort of met this goal. And then before we conclude for the day, I'll just open it back up to you all for any kind of questions or thoughts or things that you would like to share before we part ways. So, so firstly, give me a thumbs up, a real one or one with Zoom, if you have a better understanding of the Bringing the Farm to School project and its materials. Great. Love to see it. Thank you. All right. Secondly, thumbs up if you've seen a panel in action and understand the purpose of a panel in a local producer trainings context. Excellent. And then lastly, thumbs up if you have met new people from your region and have gotten to know some old friends as well. Great, great. All right then. Well, before we conclude for the day, just wanted to open it up for any kind of questions or thoughts or ideas that you all are up for sharing, up for asking. So yeah, turning it over to you all for a moment. Feel free to utilize the chat or come off mute. And these are going to be questions for me, questions for Tammy, or just questions for anyone in general. Alrighty. Well, not seeing or hearing anything. It's the end of the day. So on that note, tomorrow we'll be digging into the first half of the producer curriculum content and really diving into the introduction and as well as modules 1 and 2. And then of course, spending some more time in your breakout sessions to work on action plans for your state groups. So we will see you then tomorrow. Thanks for a successful day today and looking forward to seeing you all back here tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good day.